a national platform for public advocacy and policy on the issues that matter to so many of us. He joins us from Las Vegas. Ryan, say hello, please.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
And finally, from North Hollywood, Leonard Bushell is, well, Leonard is Leonard Bushell, the reason we're all here. Leonard, you are the editor and publisher of Addiction Recovery e-Bulletin. And starting off now, I want you to tell us why you wanted to bring everyone together for this event.
All right, thank you, William, and thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Well, I know, William, we started doing a series called Chasing the Muse a number of years ago, where we had some very creative people in person talking about how to stay sober in the first year when their creative tools were not available to them, be it vodka or weed. And we hosted a couple events with Katie Segal and her Sons of Anarchy husband, Kurt Sutter, Joey Pantoliano, the dearly departed David Carr, Joey Pantoliano, the actor, the mystery writer, Lawrence Block, about how you get through that first year. And based on the fact that we heard that Eric Clapton couldn't pick up a guitar in his first year because the guitar itself was a trigger. So how do it's sort of like when I used to teach classes at the rehab, it'd be like, you have to find your inner nerd to stay sober for a while. Things are not going to be as exciting as they used to be. And my definition of a newcomer is anybody who's doing something for the first time in sobriety, like getting on a plane the first time. Even if you have 3 years, getting on a plane the first time sober, you're a newcomer. Or playing poker. Ryan in Las Vegas, where Ryan is, playing poker the first time sober is you're a newcomer. Or, having a meeting with your ex, or even getting married for the first time in sobriety, you are a newcomer. And right now, we are all living through something we've never lived through before, which is obviously the global pandemic, which makes us all newcomers. And tonight, as you see, we have some amazing individuals who are going to talk about staying sober during a global pandemic, among other situations going on in the country and in the world. And for me, I have to say, it hasn't been that easy. After the first few weeks of the first shutdown, I felt like I was being deprived of my medicine. Because if I don't go to at least one meeting a week, I forget that I don't drink and I don't smoke pot. So I need that constant reminder. And going to AA meetings for me is important. And what that means is getting dressed, putting on clothes for the outdoors, getting in my car, starting my car to remind me I'm starting the day, dealing with traffic, which reminds me I'm human, I have a short temper, but it also helps wake me up. Because I have to be alert when I'm driving to the meeting. Getting there, helping to set up chairs, welcoming a newcomer if there's someone I don't recognize, hugging an old friend if I haven't seen some for a while and they show up, smelling the coffee, complaining about the coffee, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too strong, it's too weak. And then one by one, the room fills up with what I like to call humanity in the flesh. And I can see people's eyes, and I can see their body language, and I can have a sense of how they're feeling. And then I get to feel the vibrations of their voices when we recite the Serenity Prayer, and when people start to share. My favorite moment is when the secretary's iPhone is about to hit 9 o'clock, and someone pounds their fist on the wall and says, meeting time, and the room takes on an atmosphere of a cathedral or an ashram. And I know that we're all there for satsang, which is another way of saying a sacred gathering. Unlike watching dancing electrons on a cathode ray tube or Chinese Apple iPhone or iPad or desktop, watching one-dimensional images of three-dimensional people and hearing some disembodied voice read how it works or the 12 traditions, I have Zoom gloom. But I know it's essential. Like nurses are essential. And the guys who pick up the trash are essential. And the guys who deliver the food to the grocery market. And I know doctors are essential. I know they are essential. Unfortunately for me, I feel very lonely when they end, because for an hour I have like 47 people in front of me vying for my attention. And then once you leave the meeting, I'm all alone. And sometimes I feel better before the meeting starts. Anyway, at least at a meeting when it's over, I get to rub shoulders with people, maybe go out for coffee and fellowship. Luckily, I did find an outdoor meeting in a park nearby me. People wear masks. They sit 6 feet away on lawn chairs, or maybe since we're in LA, they're beach chairs and not lawn chairs. And people use their outside voices, and that way I can hear the word and feel the vibe. And I'm just dealing with this situation as best as I can. Thank God I have a program. I know everybody else on the Zoom has programs, and most of the people listening. And aren't we, a miraculous group of people, lucky as can be. I hope that answers your question. But it started out years ago with chasing the muse. Now it's chasing the news.
Thank you, Leonard. So I'm going to come to our panelists now. Tio, I'm going to ask you first, and this is going to be the same question to all of our panelists, and it's this. In the spirit of what Leonard was talking about, what has been the biggest challenge to your well-being, the biggest challenge to your mind and in your body and your spirit in this unprecedented time? And the second part of the question, not just the biggest challenge, but what is the single most important step or action that you have taken to take care of yourself? How have you dealt with these times? So Tio, I'll come to you first. What's the biggest challenge you faced, and how are you dealing with it?
Well, one of the biggest challenges during this COVID-19 pandemic would be a few of my friends and comrades have passed away that are in recovery. And when you attend the funerals, it's just sad because you only have about 10 or 20 people there. And you know that if it would be normal times, you know that basically 1,000 people might be there to pay respect to one of our fallen comrades. That's been a major challenge. And I know people that have passed away from COVID-19 as well, and some other underlying issues, but that's a challenge in itself. But also another challenge that exists is that one thing I love about social media is that it enables me to stay in contact with all of my comrades in recovery worldwide. So that's working out pretty good for me, but it's just also a real downer that you cannot see as many people in person. Like we have these conventions, every year in all the different cities and all throughout the entire world. And the conventions have been canceled. We cannot come together in Chicago once a year and just see everybody that's still around here. I've been clean and sober for 30 years now.
Wow.
And I'm just great for 30 years. So, and I'm like one of the big brothers, one of the predecessors. They call me the predecessor for the recovering community. But that's a challenge. But at the same time, we're doing pretty good. And what I do to keep myself pretty much on neutral ground or something like that, God blessed me my higher power blessed me last week I completed 1,000 jumping jacks, believe it or not. I did 1,000 jumping jacks. And I was just doing it just to do it. I'm laughing. Plus I sing a little bit. I'm not a professional singer, but I sing. I'm teaching college. I'm teaching at a university, North Park University. I have my organization. So we're doing the best we can do to just keep hope alive, just put it like that. But there has been some challenges. I must admit, attending those funerals of some of our fallen comrades, it really, really pierced my heart. That's a challenge. That's just the way it goes. But other than that, I think I'm doing okay. It's been, I keep it one. See, one thing I learned from the recovery process, one day at a time means a whole lot. If you really know where I'm coming from, people know this. One day at a time, you just keep it in today, you'll be okay. Once you start worrying about tomorrow and next year and all that stuff, don't get me wrong, we have to plan in our lives and all that kind of good stuff, but I just keep everything one day at a time. Tomorrow, can bring a whole different meaning to life for me. So I'm pretty much at peace right now. And I just want to say that I really appreciate being on this panel.
Thank you, Tio. You're looking good, man.
I mentioned that Tio just doesn't do 1,000 jumping jacks. He does them on camera, live.
Right.
So
That's impressive. We'll have to have you on another time to do that for us. Courtney, how about you? Courtney, what's been your biggest challenge? You're in a very public job in a very big city. What's been the biggest challenge during this time, and what's the most important thing you do to take care of yourself, Courtney?
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for having me. And I am really blessed that I have been working through this whole time. And also I haven't really even known anyone who's gotten sick, extremely sick anyways. But for me, it's been very challenging because I have been so immersed in work, like working overtime, covering all of these press conferences, like in it so hardcore. And because I'm seeing like the whole picture, like I see how the media is exaggerating things, or it's just really frustrating to me. Like obviously politics getting involved. Like I hate wearing a mask. Things are so out of our control. My wedding was supposed to be next month in Italy. Clearly that's off. So I've really had to just find new ways to kind of let out my stress. And one of the things I've been doing is setting my phone timer for 20 minutes. And I just allow myself to write all my frustrations out, and then I immediately feel better. And then a few weeks ago, my fiance and I, he is also sober, we started an in-person meeting at our house on our roof during sunsets. Like 10 people there, and that's been really helpful. And I do Zoom meetings as well. I'm a huge meditator. I meditate 20 minutes every single day. So luckily, I'll end with this. I'm coming up on 11 years sober on September 9th. So I'm just really grateful that I am not in new sobriety, because I have a lot of the tools, and I know like I'm not going to drink over COVID. But it's I think as we're getting into it longer and longer, it's just like, okay, you know, you gotta surrender.
Thank you, Courtney, and congratulations. Ryan in Las Vegas, what's been your biggest challenge in the last 5 or 6 months in the midst of this pandemic, and what do you do, and what's the most important thing you do to take care of yourself, Ryan?
So I think for me, it's a little bit different. I mean, the biggest challenge for me has actually been watching the work that we've all worked, because I work specifically in like policy and a lot within kind of our new recovery advocacy movement, to see a lot of the work that and the progress that we've made over the last couple of years be seemingly erased overnight. That's how I feel. It's very hard to see facilities, treatment facilities close their door. It's very hard to see budgets that we fought so hard for inclusion, for behavioral health care dollars and for treatment dollars be wiped away. It's very hard to see, targeted opioid response dollars, federal grant dollars be, shifted over to other issues. It's very hard for me to get on the phone with the health district here in Nevada talking about overdose numbers and what can we do about it, and being told that unless I'm calling about COVID, they don't have time for me. That's been very hard. How I've been taking care, and like Courtney, I'm grateful that I'm, coming up on 6 years in February, but I'm going to the gym. I'm listening to a lot of music. I'm tuning into meetings online. I'm staying plugged into my community as much as possible. But this has been the most extraordinary 4 months of my recovery. It has been the most difficult for me too. I've had a very, very hard time because of the lack of in-person connectivity. I think it's great that we can do this online, but some days it just doesn't cut it for me, and it's me by myself and my thoughts. And I have to say, I'm grateful that it's not Ryan Hampton, in the first 3 months of recovery, because I don't know what I would have done. And I think we all, people who are in recovery, long-term recovery, we need to go out of our way to reach those newcomers. We need to go out of our way to have those conversations. And it is limiting and it is challenging right now because of the physical distancing guidelines. But yeah, the most challenging thing for me is to watch a lot of the progress that we have made just turn back and get erased.
Thanks for your transparency and your authenticity, Ryan. Alonzo, what do you find particularly challenging in this period for you in Los Angeles there? And what are you doing to take care of yourself?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I almost feel guilty listening to this, because uniquely, this isn't that different from my normal life. I am a stand-up comic who travels. I spend tons of time alone, and when I was using, I'm a crackhead from the 80s. So I tell everyone, this ain't the first time I've isolated at home. I've done this before. Um, I am used to spending time alone. So that part wasn't really difficult for me. Um, I love what Tio said about one day at a time. The two principles of this program that have been the biggest thing for me throughout this is powerless and one day at a time. If I can hold on to those two, I can stay relatively sane. What I do for me, I'm a big motorcyclist. I love motorcycles. Motorcycles happen to be a natural social distancing vehicle. So when I get on my bike, put my helmet on, I'm alone. I'm not, and I can ride, especially like that first month in April. Like there were sanity rides that I did. The exercise thing, it took a while for me to start exercising at home. Again, Tio, I salute you doing 1,000 jumping jacks. My thing was learn to jump rope. I said, I'm going to learn to jump a rope. And now I'm jumping. I have this heavy rope. It's like thick, like a boat rope, and it weighs about 5 or 6 pounds. And I jump, 250 times a day, which is something from somebody who stumbled over a rope to now I've done that. So I should have learned French or something like that, but I'll take jumping rope. Um, the Zoom meetings I'm okay with. I always give a shout out to the techies in the program. I mean, wow. The fact that this happened and they came together right away and made this work. Without them, we'd be in so much trouble. I love the fact that people who know how to put together websites, Zoom meetings, and this and that, keep us in touch. Those are the people without whom I think we'd be lost. I feel for the newcomer because they don't have that contact. But again, because I'm a traveling comedian, I'm used to doing text messages, calls, stuff like that. It's not like could attend a lot of regular meetings. I have a regular home group, obviously, but so in a lot of ways, this was, I guess, I don't know if it's right to say an easier transition, but it's something I could deal with. Again, I feel for the new people who I think need that contact because they're not getting that. And also another thing, because of me being a comic, and make no mistake, I know it's because I'm a comic. It's not because I'm a spiritual giant. It's because I'm used to talking. I get asked to speak at a lot of Zoom meetings. I've been asked to speak at Zoom meetings literally all around the world. We got a meeting in England. You mind getting out of bed at 4 a.m. to speak and I do it. It allows me to be of service and it allows me to stay in contact. So these are some of the things I do.
Thank you, Alonzo. Dr. Dayton, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. I don't mean to throw a curveball at you, but I think you can handle it. I've known you for many, many decades. And so you've talked so poignantly. In fact, you probably are the pioneer. You may have even coined the phrase emotional sobriety, or at least coined it in a way that a lot of us have come to use it. Can you explain what emotional sobriety is and how is it that you take care of your emotional sobriety?
So it's a Bill Wilson term. Bill Wilson at one point in the AA Grapevine wrote that our next frontier was emotional sobriety. And I would like to put a shout out. I wish there were a 12-step emotional sobriety meeting because it's the next step for everybody who's in program, and you don't have to, it's where we all need to go. So emotional sobriety is basically, instead of living from 0 to 10 and 10 to 0, bouncing back and forth and seeking balance by, getting tired of being shut down and getting really intense and getting tired of being really tense and then shutting down. It's learning to live in 4, 5, and 6. It's finding balance. It's I'm an ACOA, so relational trauma is my, it's where I come from. It's what I grew up with. And a hallmark of trauma is emotional extremes, living in emotional extremes. So emotional sobriety is learning to move from the shutdown of trauma, because that trauma shuts us down. And when we are, and the other thing we do as a result of trauma is is lose it, right? We're shut down until we flip our lid, as Dan Siegel talks about. We're either in a state of numbness or high anxiety. So everything we can learn, all of program feeds into learning about emotional sobriety. The big tools for me through COVID have been a day at a time to stay in the present. I think staying in the present has become a discipline that I've understood in a new way, because going backwards, there's nothing there. It doesn't get you anywhere. Going forwards is just to sink into that kind of anxious pit feeling. Emotional sobriety is also living in the present. It's learning how to use exercise, food, right thinking, meditation, jumping rope, laughing, dancing, being with people, connecting. It's using all of those things to bring balance. And I think my big challenge has been certainly worrying about my children and grandchildren, and then observing myself getting triggered. And I'm sure that'll come up throughout this, but that to find emotional sobriety in a state of being triggered, that's emotional sobriety.
Thank you. Let me just throw this out to the group. Everybody seems to have brought up this, the Zoom meetings. Leonard, you sounded like you were sort of high on them to begin with and have soured on them, but let me throw it out to the group, and feel free to, perhaps you could just raise your hand so we don't step on each other's. What is this panel's assessment? Are virtual meetings here to stay? Ryan.
I want to do a quick follow-up to the last answer, because I want to just, it's important to note that a lot of the tools that I've received in my recovery, I am grateful to put them into use today. And I think the answer on emotional sobriety was spot on, but it was a devastating reality shock for me about 2 months ago, when one of the men who took me through the steps, who has been working for the last 15 years, reached out and did not have food in the cabinet, and was sober, and was about to lose his home, and was still sober, and was devastated, and felt like he was back to square one. And I think that some of the tools, while the emotional sobriety, some of that it works for some of us. I think that people are faced with challenges today, where they don't, the simple necessities of life, food, social determinants of health, housing, things like that are being stripped right from under them. And it is just difficult. And I think, to answer your question on the Zoom front, I think we should expand on it, and it is here to stay. I think that Zoom will continue. It should be both. It can't be one in place of the other, though, because when I got sober, I didn't have internet access or a phone or a smartphone, or, I needed to walk into a meeting. I needed in-person connectivity, and I still need in-person connectivity. So I hope that it doesn't take over what was already existing. We need to build more on the infrastructure of in-person connectivity as well. But I think that Zoom and telehealth provides a great option for rural communities, and certainly into communities that have been marginalized and don't have the types of in-person supports. But it shouldn't take the place of building those in-person supports.
Thanks, Ryan. Tio, you had your hand up. What do you want to add?
Yeah, quickly, I would like to add about emotional sobriety, then I'll answer your question. When I first got clean, I found myself crying a lot in meetings. I don't know why it just happened, because I'm a former one of them tough guys from the streets of Chicago. So when I got clean, I would give a lead, and I would find myself becoming very emotional. So I had to learn how to process my feelings, because I never did when I was using, of course. So basically, emotional sobriety is so important for ongoing recovery. So I've learned how to be to myself nowadays, because I travel a lot myself. And there was a time when I used to travel, I would always have to go look and see what's going on in that particular city or town. Now I can just sit in a hotel room for hours by myself. I'm cool with myself. Now, as far as Zoom and a virtual type of communication, I think it's really a good thing because no addict is ever alone. You know, we're never alone. There's people out here that would chime in with us, go on a Zoom conference with us, so we have to just take it for what it is. I think this pandemic has set forth a precedent that this may be the new way of life in this 20th century here. You know, it might be the new way of life, and I'm prepared for it because recovery has helped me prepare for, see, once I've gone through that addiction, they say that religion is for people that do not want to go to hell, in other words, and spirituality is for people that have gone to hell and don't want to go back. For me, recovery has just helped me tremendously with my mind, body, and spirit. So I'm solid as a man today in who I am, in my skin and in my body. So Zoom is cool with me. I just want to say that because I'm on Zoom more now than I've ever been on Zoom in my life.
Thank you. Courtney, you had your hand raised, and then Alonzo will come to you right after we do Courtney. Courtney?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm a huge fan of Zooms, especially because I have 2 younger kids. For any moms out there who like can't get a sitter, to be able to just hop on. And also it's a way to go to meetings with all of your friends. It's like, oh yeah, I'll see you on the meeting. And think about how many people are so afraid of the stigma of even stepping foot in an AA room. And this is a way for them to observe and pop on without showing their face or even their name. They can just listen. So AA, and I love what you said about the rural communities. I mean, you can go to meetings all over the world, and I've been able to speak at so many more meetings because it's you know, I was able to do this because it's like my kids are downstairs and I could just hop on for an hour. I don't have to like battle traffic to go somewhere. So I totally get the wanting to have the in-person thing, and that's why I'm starting a home group at my house. But I think it's such a blessing, and I think we could get a whole new wave of people into AA through Zoom.
Thank you. Alonzo, you had your hand raised. What do you want to add?
Well, piggybacking on what Courtney said, I have a friend in the same situation, right? She's a mom. She loves Zoom meetings because she can get to meet, and she's sober a long time, but she's one of these people who fell into life and stopped going to meetings because, you know, you got the kids and you got the job, you got blah, blah, blah. And she said she loves it because now she can check in through Zoom. You know, Ryan, regarding what you said about not having a phone and stuff like that, it reminded me, I was at a convention once, and the speaker said that when he was new, his sponsor told him, steal a big book. And he said, what? He said, listen, if someone gives you something, you don't care about it. Steal one. That's how you do. Okay, if you're new, steal a phone. You can make amends later. Steal a phone, go to Zoom meetings, get that year, and then make amends for stealing the phone. Come on, you gotta hustle.
But can I get a, since I feel like we're in the debate, since my name was mentioned, can I get a response to that?
Yeah, you have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I do want to say that, you know, I am a big fan of the Zoom. Like, I'm a big fan of the Zoom. It's great for me. I wake up, I have my coffee, I tune in. There you all are. It's great. I think it has, I'm seeing some of the comments coming in. I think it has opened up a lot of possibility that we didn't know that existed before. But I think we need to like look at it as a whole piece right now. Like, because of COVID, right? Like, we have been forced into this digital world, which I hope will continue. But quite frankly, the bar for people entering and sustaining recovery, early recovery, has also raised. It is not easier for people at this point who are in earlier recovery. It is harder, and the data supports that.
Thanks. Leonard, I want to come to you, and then Alonzo, I'll come back to you in just a minute. But Leonard, I want to ask you, do you think you could have found recovery? Could you have found sobriety in a Zoom meeting if that had been the first time you were in a room?
No, I could not have.
Because?
Because I think the process of actually having to get someone to show me where the right door was of the church to go in made me feel like I was part of something real, something bigger, something three-dimensional. I think there's more communication with someone's body language than there is with the words out of their mouth. And I remember the first time I went sober to New York City, the first thing I did was call central office and say, I need a meeting, because I had never been in New York sober or straight in my life. And it was so electric and I was shaking. And I got on the phone before the computers and They told me there was a meeting on Columbus Circle. I went, I walked in, you know, I took that singular exhale, like, oh, my people. And I was fascinated. They didn't ask me for my ID or who sent me. And I just sat down and I heard someone share in person about how grateful they were to have a winter coat because it was November and someone gave them a winter coat. And I saw the winter coat. And I don't think I could have gotten that kind of human interaction on a monitor. I mean, I'm like the naysayer. I'm saying, to me, it's like a Netflix reality show that I did not audition for.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Hollywood Squares, which I am now a square, but now it's on Hollywood.
Let me,
It is what it is what it is.
thank you, Leonard. I'm going to, in just a minute, I'm going to go to Alonzo, but I want to give Tiana a heads up. Tiana, I'm coming to you next on a question on family, so get ready. So Alonzo, you had your hand raised. What do you got for us?
Yeah, really quick. With what Leonard said, I admire anybody new who comes in through Zoom meetings, because obviously there's a power of a hug that we can't get right now. So if you're new, that makes a difference. But another thing I wanted to talk about these Zoom meetings, and it's just because I have a friend I was talking to today. He's one of the techies. He put together websites for meetings. He put together Zooms. And this is what's funny about us as alcoholics, right? As whatever. You should hear the complaints he gets. You know, it's one more time. And I said, it's like being on the committee of a convention. The only reward for being on a committee is a year of work to be told what you did wrong. And he gets the politics of the meeting. Should we record this? Can you have this speaker? Can you do this, do that? And what I would say to everyone listening is, let's stop and show a little gratitude that we have this. While this is far from perfect, we got this, okay? I know there's a couple of 30-year people on here like me. We had payphones. You know what I'm saying? We had payphones. This is amazing. So let's be grateful for what we have rather than, yeah, it's far from perfect, but let's not poke holes in it because this is all we got. And if you're a newcomer and you're watching this reality show, you can still hear the most valuable thing I heard when I came in. I'm not the only one. You can still hear that. So Zooms are going to be here and they do work.
Thank you.
I wanna
Doctor,
say that
go ahead, Leonard, quickly.
meetings a week that I wouldn't miss for the world. And I understand that it's something that has kept people sober for sure, maybe even kept them sane. And I've heard new people come and take to it like a duck to water. And, you know, thank God there are Zoom meetings. Thank God this pandemic didn't happen 30 years ago. We'd be out there howling on the streets.
Thank you, Leonard. Dr. Dayton,
They work for those who can access them. I just want to put that because they do work and I am a fan of them. I just want to point out that they work for people who can get through that entry barrier and who have access to internet and phone and et cetera. And the vast majority of people do not.
So let me go to Dr. Dayton because we've talked a lot about the alcoholic and the addict, but we've got to remember that the alcoholic and the addict is generally one of many members of a family, and it's the family that's affected by addiction. Dr. Dayton, are you worried about access to help and healing for family members who might not be as familiar with either a Zoom meeting or might not be familiar with the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous? What does the family do in a time like this?
You know, I think they do a couple of things, William. Some families, it's bringing closer. Kids who are home with their parents, if their parents are paying attention to them, are big winners in this because they get time with their parents and they're loving having time with their parents. The other side of it is the, you know, COVID, the uncertainty of COVID, the feeling of being trapped, the feeling of having parents who don't know what they're doing. We have a government that doesn't know what it's doing in our country. That's all very replicatory of the experience of the child in a chaotic home. So that is also happening to families. And my worry is that people are getting triggered because of the similar feeling of being trapped, uncertain, and they're projecting feelings from their past, right? If they grew up like me, like an ACOA, they're getting triggered with their past inner child stuff, for lack of a better, is getting triggered and projected into their family, their current family. So then it gets made about the kids. Then it gets made about the couples. In China, more people registered for divorce after they came out of that shutdown than ever before in their history. So that's, I think we make the problems we're feeling on the inside that are getting triggered from the past about the people we're sheltering in place with. I think that's a big danger in families. And if you can get onto that and use the trigger as a point of healing, that numb stuff, that hidden stuff doesn't really come up unless it gets triggered. If there's not pressure, it doesn't really come up. So if you can look at what's being triggered, step back and say, could it possibly be my issue projected? And just give yourself some space to see if that might be the case. It's an opportunity for growth that's rare.
Yeah, and can I ask you, was that a good thing that people came out of the lockdown and wanted more divorces or not?
Well, I think in my opinion, it would be, I wouldn't want them to come right out of lockdown and apply for a divorce because that's such an unusual circumstance. I'd want to know that that couple or that family looked at their own issues to see what they might be. In other words, they're making their pain about their spouse, maybe. Some of that pain was not about their spouse. It was just about them being projected onto their spouse and their kids, in my opinion.
Thank you. Courtney, I want to turn just a minute to you as the journalist that you are, working for the television station KTLA, one of the biggest in the country, if not the biggest. What do you think is going to be the storyline coming out of this pandemic as it relates to the issue that we're talking about tonight? What's the story that we're going to be hearing about after this is over? You're on mute. There you go.
First of all, I think a huge story that will not be covered is all of the people who are relapsing during this pandemic. And the attention is not focused on how many people are being affected from this pandemic in all the other ways. I mean, yes, there are a lot of people who have died from COVID, but there are a lot of, 130 people die every single day from opioid overdose, and the media does not care about that. I have tried all the time to pitch stories like that, and I've just given up. So that's definitely going to be a huge story, I think. And I unfortunately don't think it's going to be covered. And this is a story that's going to keep giving in a million different ways. I mean, just on the vaccine alone, like when that comes out, who's going to get it first? How much is it going to cost? Is it even going to work? Like every little tangent, and all the people who have lost jobs, and there's a zillion stories. I mean, it's overwhelming. And that's what I was trying to say the first time around, how like, I can't turn the news off like everyone else. Like I'm covering it nonstop. So that's an extra layer of stress that I'm dealing with through all this. I mean, it's made me like want to reconsider my career, to be honest with you. But I just really hope that regarding this issue that we can focus on helping. And Brian, your point earlier was so good about, I didn't even think about that, like about all of the work, like there's not going to be funding for any of this stuff because our kids are going to be paying back all this stuff forever. So there's going to be no money for charities and everything that helps like this. So it's a shit show.
I'm just going to jump into that really
Please,
quick
Ryan.
because this is what Courtney's saying is actually the heart of my frustration. It is where COVID hits, we are on target now. So the CDC 2019 numbers just came out a couple of weeks ago, pre-COVID, showed an uptick to 72,000 overdose deaths last year. There are experts that now believe that that number could possibly double in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. We are on track, if you include all drugs and alcohol, to lose as many, if not more people than we will lose to COVID. And especially if you include suicide in that number, it is a certain. But we're seeing cuts in behavioral health care. We're seeing cuts in recovery community organizations. We're seeing treatment centers closing their doors. We're seeing, the inability to meet at AA or NA or recovery support meetings, at all. I'm not going to like harp on the Zoom, but I hear it from people all the time who are like, yeah, but you can jump onto Zoom and do this on Zoom. That's not the solution to saving the lives and the people. People are dying because they can't access services that are needed. It's not, we don't have to look further than the 2019 data and the predictions for 2020 to see that people are dying as a direct result of what's happening. But at the same time, we also see the power of the media, which is what Courtney just spoke to. We have seen that the federal government and states can marshal tremendous resources to approach a real crisis. So they call the opioid crisis and the addiction crisis a crisis, a public health crisis. They also call COVID a public health crisis. But the response to COVID is how you really respond to a public health crisis. We've been getting platitudes for a long time. We certainly haven't been getting the funding, right? I mean, we saw the federal government print $2 trillion overnight to address COVID. I'm getting calls, you hear on the media about people not being able to get an effective vaccine or treatment, ventilators not at hospitals, right? People calling hospitals in mass confusion about what to do. And I'm like, welcome to our world for like ever. That's what we deal with every single day. But we're not seen on par as like a real health crisis. And I believe we're actually gonna see more death from suicide, drugs, and alcohol than we will from COVID. And it's incredibly frustrating.
Thank you, Ryan. I want to pivot just a moment, and I want to focus on Alonzo and Tio, because we've all been consumed by this pandemic. This gathering this evening is framed around the pandemic, but of course, about a third of the way through the pandemic, we suddenly experienced the murder of George Floyd in my community of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I want to talk, Alonzo, I would like you, Alonzo, to start, and then you, Tio, share with us as Black men in recovery what George Floyd's death and what has happened since, how has that affected you both? Alonzo?
I got to start with the topic you were just talking about, because yeah, I understand addiction and recovery is a national problem, but particularly the opioid crisis. I have to tell you how funny that is as a Black person, because in the 80s when crack was killing us, it wasn't a crisis, just throw them in jail. So now it affects the white community, and suddenly it's this big crisis. And I'm in recovery, and I love recovery, I believe in recovery. But as a nation, that's not the priority. We have this pandemic, this unknown disease that is spreading from people breathing that is killing us. And I'm sorry, that's more important than anything. We can't deal with anything until we deal with that. We can't sit in the same room with each other. So I say, let's get our priorities straight. Let's figure this out. Courtney, I'm such a cynic. When the vaccine comes out, the rich people are going to get it first, because that's how America works. And then it's going to spread, and hopefully your insurance covers it, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I believe is going to happen. But yeah, regarding this thing, listen, I would love to see recovery homes and all that finance, but we got a bigger problem right now. That's my belief. And I'm a strong believer. I love recovery, but that's how I feel. When you talk about George Floyd and now Blake and the social unrest and the things we have to deal with being a Black American, another level of stress, and we were talking about this recently. This isn't new. It's not like it didn't happen before. The only thing that has changed is now everyone's carrying a video camera. So now the millions of people who never believed us when we said the cops beat us, the cops kill us, we are treated differently by the police, are suddenly looking at cameras and saying, wow, you're right. And the interesting thing, this is my belief on George Floyd, it was because we were home, right? We were quarantined. So we were home and we watched the news and we saw it, and we saw a man die in real time. Maybe if the world had been moving and everyone had been where, it might have just been another soundbite. but the entire world watched, not just the United States, the entire world watched the police murder a black man. And the world looked at America and said, the hell, don't you dare talk to us about human rights or anything. You don't get the high road anymore because look what you do. In the black community, William, I hate to say it, this is normal. When I say normal, I don't mean acceptable. I mean, it happens, we know about it, we teach our kids. They're like Doc Rivers, the coach of the Clippers, was talking about it yesterday. The outrage of being a black parent having to teach your kids how not to be killed by the cops. White parents don't have to do that. That's a real thing. So that in times of pandemic, sobriety, and everything else, it's another level of stress, right? It's another thing that you have to deal with. But we've dealt with it. We're dealing with it. Are there going to be explosions and riots? Yeah. But people can't imagine the pressure and the anger, you know, while we're dealing with George Floyd. Oh, look, they just did it again. And now they're like, calm down while we explain why we grabbed a man by the shirt and shot him 7 times in the back, as if there's some explanation that would make that okay. So anger, frustration, pain, all of these things, additional levels of emotion. I thank God for the program, which has taught me how to deal with so much of this, particularly anger, and to use the energy in a positive way, attending protests, etc. But it is real. It is another level, and we do our best, I guess. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Tio Hardiman in Chicago, tell us, how has your recovery been impacted by the death of George Floyd and everything since?
But like Alonzo said, it's like more the norm here in Chicago for me, because right now in Chicago, we've experienced a little bit close to 500 homicides in Chicago so far this year, and over 2,300 people shot in Chicago. So every weekend, we have multiple homicides in Chicago. Now, I must admit, since I've been clean, my journey here in recovery, I've been clean 30 years now, but when my 10-year mark came up, my revolutionary spirit kind of began to ignite itself. So I'm one of the leaders in Chicago in the movement when it comes down to standing up against excessive force and police brutality. Now, George Floyd's death, and I have to be honest with everybody out there, I'm recovering without a doubt. But if I was on location in Minneapolis when the officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck, I would not have had any other choice in my constitution as a man. I don't care if George is black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or Martian. Let me just say that. I would have had to push that officer off his neck. That's something I would have had to do within my spirit as a man, respecting humanity. It might have been the wrong decision because I would have had to deal with the aftermath. But the death of George Floyd, believe it or not, has not really moved me one way or another, because I've been dealing with this issue for far too long. There's a preponderance of evidence that the police continue to kill unarmed black men, and this is the real trick for everybody to understand. There's no evidence in the United States that exists that black men are a threat to the police in any kind of way. There's no evidence to back it up. So why are police steady killing unarmed black men? I just don't know. But I have no regrets in my life, because I stood up each and every time something happened to somebody. I put my work in, so I'm cooling out, and I'm in the cooling out phase now, because I don't agree with looting. I do not agree with messing with people's homes and burning up businesses, because my heart goes out to the working class people. The poor working class people have been hurt by a lot of the looting and everything. George Floyd, may his soul rest in peace. That's it.
Thank you. We have about 6 or 7 minutes. We've got a million questions over here that I could be fielding, but I want to, Leonard, I'm going to come to you in just a second. I want all of you to be thinking about this. I'm giving you a heads up to wrap it up. I get a sense that there are a lot of people who are tuned in this evening who are struggling, actually, or they know somebody who's struggling. And I want each of you to be able to give a message of hope and a suggestion about what people should be doing in these times. So be thinking about that while Leonard shares what you want to share. Go ahead, Leonard.
Well, I think it applies to that. Back in the beginning of towards the end of March, I lost a friend in New York named Neil Lasher. And I started lighting a candle every day for all the souls leaving the planet from the COVID disease. And I've been doing that every single day, because I know there is this cloud of grief over all of us that we might not be able to feel because it would be so overwhelming. So my little contribution is lighting a candle every day for everyone, because every time I heard about a senior citizen dying in an old age home in New York, I thought, oh, that's my mother. Every time, every day, who has already passed away. But so I just light a candle for the deceased and wish them a splendid journey to wherever they're going. So it makes me feel a little less guilty for like survivor's guilt, which we're all going to have, but we're also going to be grief stricken that 200,000 Americans died by not their, and it wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything. It just happened, and we'll see where this goes. But and one other little thing I do to help me, the 24-hour-a-day book, the little Hazelton Black book. I read that every morning anyway, but now I read it with more concentration and more feeling. The meditation of the day and the prayer of the day, I try and take it in more deeply, because I know there is an energy in the air that is frightening, and I'm not Black. And my mother taught me how not to get caught, how not to get shot. And so far I'm doing pretty good. Before we end and we start taking questions, I just want to say I'm so proud and privileged to know everyone on this call. Courtney, we only met once, but we are both from Philadelphia. So I feel, like your name should be Kathy, because everybody I knew growing up was named Kathy. And Alonzo and Ryan and Tio in Chicago and Tian. And I'm so proud to know all of you. It's just, I wish my mother was alive to see what fabulous people I have in my life now, and no one's out on bail, right?
Leonard, I think your mother just sent me a message over here in the chat box here. We'll follow up a little bit later. Courtney, I wanna come to you, and I'm gonna go down the road, but Alonzo, I'm gonna close with you because I want you to leave us with a little bit of humor, so be thinking about it. I'm giving you a heads up, man. Courtney, you're in the public arena of journalism in an enormous market. People know your personal story. You melded those together quite effectively. What is your message, Courtney, for people who are struggling this evening and need help?
So the one thing that was drilled into my head over and over again at rehab and in early sobriety was that nothing is going to get better by drinking or drugging. So whatever you're dealing with in COVID right now, choosing to, relapse or keep drinking, like, you're only making it worse. You're going to feel worse if you blew your sobriety, and you're probably making the situation better. Not to mention, I think a lot of people, like my own sister, who is depressed all the time, and she's also now just admitted that she has a drinking problem, they don't realize that alcohol is a depressant. So you're only going to be more depressed. I'm a huge proponent of trying to meditate. That, as I mentioned earlier, is my number one tool. That helps take away the worry, and it helps you be present in the moment. I mean, all we can do, nobody has the answer to this. This is a global thing that we're all just like, what the F is happening? So we just gotta deal with it and know that this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And I hate to plug my book, and if you DM me, I will give you a free link. So I'm not trying to sell anything, but the whole reason that I wrote it was that I don't have like 2 minutes or, a whole text chat or a tweet to be able to tell all my advice. That's why I wrote this book, to help people. So all my advice is in this book.
Thank you, Courtney. Ryan, you've written a book as well that's really touched a lot of people. You've turned the adversity of your own situation into hope for so many people. Ryan, what is the message you'd like to leave people with tonight, those especially who are struggling?
Absolutely. And I just want to say also, I can't wait until we can actually get together, because Alonzo, I want to go have a meal with you, man. Like there's so much, I could go on forever, but I want this to be like the Ryan Alonzo back and forth, because I can't wait to meet you. Tio, the same thing. I want to say, and I think my message may be a little bit different, and maybe it's not. First and foremost, if you need help, ask for help. Talk to a loved one. Don't be ashamed. But my message is more for the other side, the one who's receiving that help or is receiving that message. there was a lot of times, you know, when the messages of don't use no matter what, don't drink no matter what, I couldn't stop. And I think we're seeing, I mean, we have lost friends from overdoses. There are people right now who can't stop and services aren't available to them. And I'd like to say if you are one of those people and you are using right now and you cannot stop, ask for help, but make sure you've got naloxone in your house. Make sure, and you can get these from public health departments, that you're testing your drugs for fentanyl, so you're not going to have a fentanyl overdose. If you're receiving that call from someone who is using and they just want to talk to you, please be there to support them. Please don't shut them out of your life, because that was me. That was me for a long time. I couldn't stop for the life of me, and I had people who shut me out of their life and wouldn't talk to me, right? And it was my mom and my best friend who actually ended up helping me get me over that hump and into treatment. That didn't lose my phone number. So don't give up on your loved ones and your friends. We need that connection, even that limited connection that we have right now. Don't give up on them. And if you are somebody who can't stop, I would encourage you to do less harm right now, because you'll never be able to get into recovery if you're not alive.
Thank you, Ryan. Dr. Dayton, you have mentioned several times tonight that you're an ACOA, and for those who don't know what that is, that's the adult child of an alcoholic. You are in recovery as an adult child. You've talked about that, written about it. What's the message that you have tonight, Tian, for the family member who is out there and not knowing what to do?
About an alcoholic or about themselves?
Both.
So if they don't know what to do about an alcoholic, I think you're hearing all the advice that's good from everybody on this panel. Don't give up on them. Try to get them to a meeting, you know, all the kinds of stuff. Try to get them help, but get yourself help. Nothing will come if you don't help yourself. And to the ACOA, to the traumatized people living don't underestimate how painful it is to live with active addiction. Don't underestimate the trauma that you're experiencing on a repeated basis, the cumulative trauma. Stay in the present in a really disciplined way. Stay in the present. Don't go back, don't go forward. And I would say love both the child inside of you, because that child inside of you needs your love first. And be compassionate. And also, I think love the one you're with. Love the one you're with. I mean, it's that in the 50s, we used to have a way, if you were raised as a 50s woman, you were taught, stretch your arm out and do something about everybody within your own reach. That's the world you can change, including yourself. And I would say take ownership and responsibility for yourself and the people you touch on a daily basis. That's where it starts.
Thank you, Dr. Dayton. Tio, you
I have a
with
simple
people.
message for everybody.
Go ahead.
If you ever fall down in life, it's your duty to get right back up, because if you stay down too long, you may not have the energy to get back up. That's my motto. That's my slogan out here in the universe. God has taken me in a lot of directions since I've been clean and sober. I've traveled to 40 states in the United States. I've been in, I'm not saying this to toot my horn, I'm just talking about how recovery works. I've been in sessions with former Prime Minister David Cameron. I sat down with former Queen Nora from Jordan here in my recovery. I know people like Leonard, you know, and I know good people throughout the entire world. I have good friends from all walks of life, in other words, from celebrities all the way to my brothers and sisters on the streets here in Chicago. So never give up on yourself. Do everything in your power to just stay resilient and have the fortitude, because recovery, that one day at a time, like I said early on, has helped me out tremendously, because I must admit, I definitely live one day at a time. Tomorrow, things, you know, we can have an earthquake tomorrow. So today, I'm living today, you know. So that keeps me out of a whole lot of mess and nonsense. And I do not engage in any drama. Whenever somebody brings drama up, I'm out the way. Look, I'll get back with you next time. I've been through enough drama for everybody. so I resigned from the drama club, okay?
Thanks a lot, Tio. You're getting too old for the drama, man.
That's right.
Alonzo, you make a living. You make a living making people laugh, and you do it well. and people love your humor, and there's got to be room for humor in the midst of a pandemic. There's got to be humor in the midst of the struggles that we as recovering people are having. Tell us about that.
Well, to start with, Tio, I'm going to say it's easy to sit in Chicago and say, oh, we may have an earthquake tomorrow, versus us in California, where we might actually have an earthquake tomorrow. All right.
Right.
So just calm down and find something else to wish for.
That's right.
Yes, I tell people, try to keep laughing. Courtney, with all due respect, I tell people, take a break from the news. There's nothing worse than leaving the news on all the time. You will lose all hope because they just keep banging in your head the worst that possible things that could happen, right? Listen, people, you want to give up hope? Guess what? We've got toilet paper. Remember 4 months ago, you didn't think we could get, we don't even think about it now. We're like, man, I'm throwing away toilet paper now. You see, there's hope. We have toilet paper. We're slow, but we're moving forward. Are we doing well? No, we're not doing well. How bad are we doing? The murder hornets left. That's how bad, honestly. That's how bad we're doing as a country. The murder hornets has given up on us, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But no, just find a way to laugh. Take a break. Take a break from social media. Take a break from the news. You can't handle the constant pounding of it. Nobody can. You know, Courtney, I mean, I understand it's your job, but even you said it's hard, right? It's part of your job. And another thing I do, I got a couple of buddies. There's a group of 4 of us. And we have this little Zoom meeting amongst ourselves. And we kind of joke, who's in the barrel this week? And then that guy tells us what's going on with his week. And we talk about it and we laugh. Take a social distance walk with somebody. You can physically be outdoors with somebody, right? You can't, it's not wrong. Just don't take a social distance walk with 55 people in a rented Airbnb, all right? 20 somethings, I'm talking to you. You know it, you guys, stop it, all right? You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You know what? That's the message of AA. That's the message of this program. That's the message, even in this meeting, you hear 6 years, 11 years, 30-something year, whatever. We're all over the place. We're new. You're going to be okay. Find a way to laugh. Tune into something funny on Netflix or whatever. You might want to go to Amazon and look at a special called Heavy Lightweight by a guy named Alonzo Bowden. Just saying, it's a break from reality. All right. Find it. We're laughing. Allow yourself to do that.
William, I just want to share the 2 phrases that have been most helpful to me in the last 26 years. One is that, and this is for all the chosen people out there, it's a lot easier to stay sober than it is to get sober. And the other one for me as an ex-drug addict is alcohol is a liquid drug. And it keeps me away from drinking, and it keeps me away from relapsing because I don't ever want to have to get sober again. And that's my little gems. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Well, I think it's time to close. We could carry on for another entire hour. There's that much wisdom, experience, and hope among our panelists, but I think it is time for us to go. And so I want to thank Tian and Alonzo and Leonard, Ryan and Courtney and Tio. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy lives to share your experiences and for helping so many people tonight. I want to thank our sponsors, the Recovery Shop, www.recoveryshop.com, the Addiction Recovery e-Bulletin, and I also want to thank Hazel and Betty Ford for being sponsors this evening. A special thanks to Leonard Bushell, yay, Leonard, who knew that tonight should and had to happen, and an equally yay, Abra K, who worked with Leonard to make sure that this did happen.
And it will happen again at the end of September.
And it'll happen again at the end of
All
September.
new people, sorry guys. Okay.
Well, thank you for making this happen. And finally, really, I'm amazed to see the chat light up like it has. We want to thank all those who signed up and joined us tonight. We had, as I said, close to 600 people who wanted to tune in. We know that addiction is an illness of isolation. Tonight, we're reminded that the antidote to addiction is community. The community that came together for this past hour or so to affirm that staying sober, maintaining recovery in an era of uncertainty is certain to happen as long as we don't try to do it all alone. And so we bid you goodbye, and we urge you to stay safe and stay healthy trust the process, and stay the course as onward we go together. Good night.
Thank you, William. You're the master.
Thank you, William.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Leonard.
Nice work.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for